from this week's political stock exchange on the Israel-Hamas war. What's your opinion on the attack by the Hamas on Israel? So here are the first set of responses, and remember, as is always the case with the PSE data that we put out, you will see responses from those who say they vote for the NDA, that's under the NDA column, and then there are responses from those who say they vote for the opposition, and in the end we have the summation or the total. You can pick up the variation in the responses. So this is a fight for Palestine's freedom, say 21% of the respondents. This is a result of atrocities by Israel, say 18% of the respondents. This is an act of terror, say 46% of the overall respondents, but within that 60% of NDA respondents think this is an act of terror, but only 36% of opposition respondents say this is an act of terror. So a big variation within that overall number. This is a fight over a religious place, say 3% of the respondents, and this is done maliciously to spoil Israel's relations with Arab countries, say 6%. So the big number there, 46% of the total respondents in this poll think it's an act of terror. 60% of NDA voters think this is an act of terror. So with this, let me now take the second question that I have for you on this week's edition of the Political Stock Exchange, which is about India's position. So what position should India take on the Israel-Palestine question? So let's take that. Should we support Israel? Should we support Palestine? So here are the responses. 42% of the overall respondents say India should support Israel. Interestingly, within that, 62% of those who say they voted for the NDA or vote for the NDA are wanting to support Israel. Only 28% of those who say they vote for the opposition say India should support Israel. Those who say India should support Palestine is 17% of the overall respondents. 22% of them are opposition respondents and 10% are NDA voters. And support Palestine but oppose terror, that's 34% of the overall respondents. But interestingly, 42% of those who say they vote for the opposition are in support of this position that India should support Palestine but oppose terrorism. And Yashwant Deshmukh, as I go through the data for this week's Political Stock Exchange, a very timely tracker because it helps capture what the Indian voter thinks of the Hamas-Israel conflict. The interesting thing there to me is the differences between those who say they vote for the NDA and those who say they vote for the opposition. Those who want to vote for the NDA much more strongly in favor of Israel than those who say they vote for the opposition.
Yeah, true that. And even though in the last couple of issues that we tracked on the tracker series in a run-up to the election, you remember on the Vidhuri and prior to that on one more occasion, the political device was not there. I mean, it was like a unanimous kind of thing while acting. But this certainly is one issue which is very clearly dividing the perception pretty much on the political and ideological line, if I may say so. I mean, I could have given even the demographic profile on religion and other identities, but that was not the idea, Rahul. The idea was to see whether the concept of this, the entire philosophy of or the concept of this Middle East crisis is having a resonance in India purely on the ideological and political issues, the way it resonates in UK, US, and other developed countries as well. And yes, this is pretty much happening over here, pretty much being debated on political and ideological lines.
Veena Sikri, India traditionally, through the 70s, the 80s, a very strong backer of Palestine. Now, however, from 2014, the Indian government has pivoted very strongly in favor of Israel, and that comes through in the data as well. Those who are likely to vote for the BJP and the NDA, much more pro-Israel than those who say they vote for the opposition.
I would draw a slightly more nuanced line on this.
Okay.
And I would say that the opposition, the government's support for Palestine remains, but the support against terrorism, that has strengthened. I think here I would recall Prime Minister Modi's first statement, which he made when Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th. That was purely based on opposition to terror, opposition to Hamas. Now, here we must draw a distinction between Hamas and Palestine. This is very important because I think that we have to isolate the terrorist organization Hamas, recognize the world over as a terrorist organization, isolate them. But the support for Palestine, I think, remains. We have seen the very strong statement made by the Ministry of External Affairs that India supports a just and secure state for the people of Palestine within secure borders. Now, that has not changed at all, but we are speaking much more firmly against terrorism. And I think both the attack by Hamas on the very bestial and cruel attack on October 7th, and even the attack on the hospital today in Gaza, I think that too, we've seen all this, I think this attack today was clearly aimed at disrupting President Biden's visit to Tel Aviv. And certainly it has disrupted the summit. But I think this is what we have to focus on. Against Hamas, in favor of Palestine, against any form of terror. No excuse for terror. No good terrorists, no bad terrorists, no root cause terrorists. No terrorism at all.